Long before the witches of medieval Europe, before the dark enchantresses of folklore, there was a time when sorcery was not just whispered about in fear, it was an undeniable force that shaped the fate of empires. In the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, where the first great cities of humanity rose from the dust, the ancient Mesopotamians believed that dark magic lurked in the unseen corners of existence. It was a force older than the temples, older than the kings, a power that defied the will of the gods themselves. To speak of the witch was to speak of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of curses that could twist the body with disease, unravel the mind with madness, or summon the dead to torment the living. These were not mere stories told to frighten children. They were deadly truths etched into clay tablets, inscribed with desperate prayers for protection. Witches were believed to walk among ordinary men and women, concealed beneath veils of deception, whispering their incantations under the cover of darkness. Their power was silent, insidious, and unstoppable, until it was too late. For the kings who ruled mighty cities like Ur, Nineveh, and Babylon, a single curse from a sorcerer could mean the fall of a dynasty. For the commoners who toiled in the fields and markets, the shadow of a witch could bring suffering beyond imagination. And for those who dared to challenge them, retribution came swiftly, for the witch knew how to strike without blade or army, only with words, symbols, and forces beyond mortal comprehension. This is the story of the witches of ancient Mesopotamia, the unseen manipulators of fate, the feared wielders of forbidden power, and the shadowy figures who haunted the dreams of an entire civilization. Mesopotamian culture was built upon a delicate and sacred equilibrium, an intricate balance between gods, humans, and the ever-threatening forces of chaos. The great cities of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria flourished under the belief that divine order, or me, governed the cosmos. The gods were the ultimate rulers of fate, dictating everything from the rise and fall of kings to the fertility of the land. Humanity's role was to serve the gods, offering sacrifices and prayers to maintain this harmony. But there were those who sought to bend reality to their own will, to wield powers not granted by the heavens. These individuals were branded as witches, dangerous figures who defied the gods and risked unraveling the fragile order of existence. To the Mesopotamians, witchcraft was not a mere superstition. It was a profound and terrifying threat. It represented a direct violation of the divine laws that kept chaos at bay. In Sumerian and Akkadian texts, witches were known by the term Kishpu, a word that carried dual meaning. It referred both to the act of sorcery itself and to the sinister individuals who practiced it. The mere accusation of Kishpu was enough to incite fear, for such magic was believed to work in secret, hidden from the eyes of men but known to the gods. Unlike the priest-magicians who performed rituals sanctioned by deities, the Kishpu operated in darkness, seeking power through illicit means. Their magic was whispered in forbidden tongues, traced in symbols on clay tablets, and sealed with blood and fire. The Mesopotamians believed that these sorcerers could manipulate divine will itself, turning the favor of the gods into wrath, calling upon dark spirits to do their bidding, and binding the souls of their enemies with curses that could stretch beyond death. One of the most feared abilities of the Kishpu was their power over demons. In Mesopotamian cosmology, demons were chaotic entities that roamed the world, preying upon the weak and the unprotected. While priests and exorcists sought to repel these malevolent forces, witches were said to summon them, forging pacts in exchange for their dark services. They called upon the Utuku, shadowy spirits of the dead, the Alu, faceless night terrors that suffocated their victims in their sleep, and the dreaded Lamashtu, a monstrous entity feared for stealing newborns from their cradles. But witches did not only traffic in supernatural forces, they were believed to use their craft against their own people. Love spells, poisons, and hexes were common fears in Mesopotamian society. A witch could inflict disease upon her enemies, turn a lover's heart cold, or even bring ruin to an entire household with a single uttered curse. The fear of Ashipu ran so deep that kings themselves sought divine protection, commissioning extensive rituals and constructing temples dedicated to warding off witchcraft. Yet, for all their secrecy and terror, witches were not invincible. The Mesopotamians devised powerful countermeasures to detect and punish those accused of practicing forbidden magic. The Ashipu, or exorcist priests, were trained to combat the effects of Ashipu, using sacred incantations, ritual purifications, and protective amulets to cleanse those afflicted by curses. Those suspected of witchcraft faced severe consequences: banishment, ritual execution, or the dreaded river ordeal, where the gods themselves would decide their fate. For the people of Mesopotamia, the threat of the witch was ever present, a shadow lurking beyond the sacred fires of civilization. To challenge the gods was to invite destruction, and those who wielded Ashipu walked a dangerous path, one that led either to great power or to utter ruin. Witches were believed to command forces that defied human understanding, wielding dark arts that brought terror to the hearts of even the most powerful rulers. Their abilities were so feared that ancient scribes carved protective spells into clay tablets, desperate to ward off their influence. Exorcists and priests devised complex rituals to counteract their sorcery, for the power of the witch was not only insidious, it was relentless. Among their many terrifying abilities, witches were said to summon demons, creatures of chaos that lurked in the shadows between the mortal world and the underworld. The Utuku, spirits of the restless dead, were called forth to haunt the living, their spectral forms lingering in dark corners, whispering threats to those cursed. More feared still was the Alu, a faceless entity that tormented its victims by creeping into their minds, paralyzing them in their sleep, and driving them to madness. These demons were not bound by the laws of gods or men, they answered only to those who dared summon them. Beyond commanding spirits, witches were believed to be skilled in the creation of deadly poisons, crafting brews that could bring agonizing death or slow, wasting sickness. These potions were mixed in secret, their ingredients gathered under the cover of night, venomous herbs, sacred dust stolen from temple altars, even the blood and bones of animals sacrificed in unholy rites. The mere suspicion of such poisoncraft could condemn a person to execution, for the Mesopotamians knew that death at the hands of a witch was not an ordinary death. It was a death imbued with malevolence, designed to ensure suffering long after the body had failed. But death was not the only weapon a witch could wield. Their curses were insidious, capable of twisting fate itself. A spoken incantation, a whispered spell in the dead of night, could bring upon an enemy a life of misery. Some spells were said to cause wasting diseases that no healer could cure, while others could drive a person to madness, filling their mind with whispers and visions of horrors unseen by others. Even the gods of fertility were not beyond their reach. Curses of infertility were among the most feared, for they could strip a family of heirs, ensuring a bloodline's slow extinction. Yet, of all the dark arts attributed to witches, none was feared more than the Ashipu curse, a ritual of vengeance that summoned spirits of the dead to torment the living. In this dreadful act, a witch could call upon souls trapped in the underworld, binding them to a chosen victim. The dead would rise, unseen but ever present, whispering nightmarish things into the ears of the cursed, draining their vitality and filling their dreams with unspeakable horrors. Some victims awoke screaming in the night, their minds shattered. Others wasted away as if consumed by an invisible force. The Ashipu curse was considered the ultimate act of supernatural cruelty, for it not only harmed the body, but also bound the soul, ensuring that even death would bring no peace. The fear of witches was not mere superstition, it was a reality that shaped the laws, rituals, and fears of ancient Mesopotamian civilization. For in a world where the gods held dominion over fate, the witches were the ones who dared to challenge the divine order, bending reality itself to their will. For those who fell under the shadow of a witch's curse, terror seeped into every aspect of their lives. A victim of Ashipu, Mesopotamian witchcraft, could suffer afflictions beyond human remedy. Unexplained illnesses, madness, infertility, or even slow, agonizing death. But there was one last hope for salvation: the powerful priest-magicians known as the Ashipu. The Ashipu were more than mere healers. They were warriors of the divine, trained to combat the unseen forces of darkness. Unlike ordinary priests who led temple rituals, the Ashipu specialized in exorcism, purification, and the art of reversing spells. They studied ancient texts filled with protective incantations and devoted their lives to mastering the sacred knowledge passed down from the gods. When summoned to aid a victim of witchcraft, they would begin an elaborate process of spiritual cleansing, calling upon the forces of order to undo the chaos wrought by sorcery. Their rituals were precise, intricate, and deeply rooted in Mesopotamian cosmology. First, the Ashipu would diagnose the curse, determining whether it was inflicted by an envious rival, a vengeful spirit, or a malicious witch. This required divination, often using clay tablets inscribed with omens, the examination of animal entrails, or the observation of celestial signs. Once the nature of the curse was revealed, the counteracting ritual would begin. Sacred prayers were chanted, invoking the gods of wisdom and protection. The most powerful incantations called upon deities such as Marduk, the great dragon slayer and protector of humanity, or Enki, the god of water and wisdom, who held dominion over hidden knowledge. These divine forces were believed to have the power to cleanse evil from the afflicted, restoring balance to their souls and bodies. However, when the witch's magic was particularly strong, the Ashipu might invoke an even darker force, the demon king Pazuzu. Unlike the malevolent spirit summoned by witches, Pazuzu was a paradoxical figure, a demon feared for his destructive power, yet also revered as a protector against evil. The Ashipu would craft amulets bearing his fearsome image, his lion-like face, taloned hands, and wings spread wide, and place them near the victim. It was believed that Pazuzu's terrifying presence would drive away lesser demons, breaking the hold of the witch's curse. But while an Ashipu could cleanse a victim, the true source of the affliction, the witch, had to be eradicated to ensure the curse would not return. This led to one of the most feared and brutal trials in Mesopotamian society, the river ordeal. The river ordeal was based on the belief that the gods would reveal the truth through water. If a person was accused of witchcraft, they were cast into a river, a direct appeal to divine justice. If they drowned, it was taken as proof of their guilt, for the river had rejected them. Their body would be discarded, and their name erased, ensuring their spirit would never find peace. But if they survived, emerging from the water gasping for breath, the gods had deemed them innocent, and they were set free. Despite its brutal nature, the river ordeal was seen as the ultimate test of divine judgment, beyond the reach of human bias. However, for those falsely accused, it was often a death sentence. Fear of witches was so deeply ingrained in Mesopotamian society that mere suspicion could seal one's fate. Thus, the battle between witches and the Ashipu was an eternal struggle, one between order and chaos, light and shadow. As long as witchcraft existed, the need for exorcists and protectors remained, for even the mightiest kings feared the whispered words of a curse spoken in the dead of night. Among the dark legends whispered through the clay tablets of Mesopotamian scribes, three figures stand out: witches whose names carried terror across the land of the Tigris and Euphrates. Their stories, though shrouded in myth, were warnings of the dangers of forbidden magic. To invoke their names was to summon dread, for each of them had dared to defy the divine order, wielding power meant only for the gods. In the ancient city of Kish, where towering ziggurats reached toward the heavens and temples stood as symbols of divine favor, a single woman was said to have brought ruin to an entire population. Her name was lost to time, but she was remembered only as the Witch of Kish, a sorceress whose vengeance knew no bounds. Legends say she was once a healer, a woman skilled in the arts of herbs and remedies, but her knowledge took a darker turn when she was betrayed by the city's rulers. Whether she was wrongfully accused or truly harbored dark intentions, none could say, but the consequences of her wrath were undeniable. The Witch of Kish was said to have called upon a shadow demon, a formless entity that thrived in darkness and slithered unseen through the streets. One by one, the people of Kish fell to an unnatural plague. Black boils covered their bodies, their breaths turned to ragged whispers, and their eyes grew hollow, as though their very souls had been drained. The priests of the city, fearing that her magic would consume Kish entirely, performed a great ritual to banish the darkness. A council of Ashipu, exorcists of the highest order, tracked her to a hidden chamber where she was found surrounded by bones, her hands stained with the remnants of her sorcery. She was dragged before the temple of Enlil, condemned as a bringer of ruin. Her execution was swift, her body burned, her ashes cast into the river to be carried away from the land of the living. Yet, even after her death, whispers persisted that her spirit remained, lurking in the forgotten corners of Kish, waiting to exact vengeance once more. Of all the crimes against the gods, none was more blasphemous than disrupting the order of life and death. In Uruk, the city of Gilgamesh, one woman was said to have attempted the unthinkable, resurrecting the dead. Her name has been erased from history, but the legend of the sorceress of Uruk has never been forgotten. It was said that she lost someone dear to her, a husband, a child, perhaps a forbidden lover. Grief turned to obsession, and she began searching for a way to defy the gods themselves. Hidden texts, stolen incantations, and offerings of blood became her tools, and with each forbidden act, she edged closer to the knowledge that should never be possessed by mortals. On the night of her greatest ritual, she stood before an altar carved from black stone, inscribing symbols in the language of the underworld. With a voice trembling with both fear and power, she spoke the incantation, calling forth the spirits of the dead. The earth trembled, and the ground split open. But what emerged was not the soul she longed for. It was something else entirely. A tide of Adimu, restless, vengeful ghosts, rose from the underworld, wailing with hunger, their spectral forms twisted by centuries of torment. They did not recognize their summoner as their savior, but as their prey. Before she could undo her mistake, they surrounded her, their cold, clawed hands grasping at her flesh. She was never seen again, but it is said that on certain nights, the air in Uruk grows deathly still, and those who wander too far into the ruins might hear the desperate cries of a woman begging to be freed from the grasp of the dead. Among the oldest and most feared names in Mesopotamian mythology is Lilitu, a creature neither fully woman nor fully demon, yet possessing the power of both. Some called her the first witch, a dark enchantress who seduced men, stole infants from their cradles, and fed on the life force of the living. She was a creature of the night, her presence marked by the howling of the wind and the sudden stillness of the stars. Lilitu was said to have been once mortal, a woman who walked the temples of the gods, but refused to submit to their will. Instead of obeying the laws of men and deities alike, she sought power on her own terms. She learned the secret names of spirits, whispered to demons, and drank from the cup of forbidden knowledge. For her defiance, she was cursed, cast out of society, marked as a lamashtu, a night-stalking predator. It is said that when the sun set, Lilitu would rise. She moved like smoke through the streets, her presence intoxicating yet deadly. Men who gazed into her eyes would fall into a feverish trance, waking days later with their strength drained, their bodies cold as if something had fed upon their very essence. But it was newborns who suffered the worst of her wrath. Legends warned mothers to guard their children well, for Lilitu would slip into homes unseen, stealing infants from their beds and leaving behind only silence. In time, she became more than a witch. She became something eternal, a being feared across civilizations. Some say she was the precursor to Lilith, the demoness of later traditions, but in Mesopotamian lore, she was more than a legend. She was a force, a warning, a nightmare made flesh. These three figures, the Witch of Kish, the sorceress of Uruk, and Lilitu, were more than just cautionary tales. They were embodiments of Mesopotamian fears, the fear of betrayal, of defying the gods, of losing control to powers beyond mortal understanding. Their stories were whispered across generations, etched into clay tablets, and used to warn against the dangers of those who dared to manipulate the unseen. Even in death, their legacies endured. The exorcists continued to perform rituals to ward off their lingering spirits, while amulets were crafted to protect against their curses. And though their names may have faded from the temples, their shadows still lurked in the minds of those who feared the night. Though the grand cities of Mesopotamia, Babylon, and Nineveh have long crumbled into dust, their stories have never truly faded. The beliefs, fears, and legends that once echoed through their temple halls and city streets still whisper through time, finding new forms in different cultures. The ancient Mesopotamian witch, once a figure of terror, feared for her forbidden knowledge and ability to command spirits, has never truly disappeared. Instead, she is transformed, her shadow stretching across centuries, leaving an imprint on folklore, literature, and even modern superstitions. Long after the cuneiform tablets of the Sumerians and Akkadians were buried beneath the sands, stories of witches continued to spread. From the seer sorceresses of the Arabian deserts to the malevolent spellcasters of medieval Europe, the essence of the Mesopotamian witch persisted. The terrifying concept of summoning demons, invoking curses, and controlling the forces of darkness did not vanish with time. It evolved, shaping new myths and legends in cultures far beyond the land between the Tigris and Euphrates. The fear of witches did not fade with the rise of later civilizations. It adapted. In the mystical tales of the 1001 Nights, sorcerers and witches appear as powerful figures who wield supernatural forces, capable of bending reality itself. These figures reflect the same ancient anxieties that plagued the Mesopotamians: the terror of unseen powers, the fear of losing one's soul to dark magic, and the desperate need to seek divine protection. Much like the witches of Mesopotamian lore, the sorcerers of the Arabian Nights could summon jinn, manipulate fate, and cast curses upon their enemies. They were both feared and sought after, their magic capable of both great destruction and miraculous transformation. These tales carried echoes of the Kispu curse, the ritual where spirits of the dead were summoned for revenge. Even centuries after the fall of Babylon, the idea that a practitioner of dark arts could call upon spirits to haunt the living remained a terrifying possibility. While the belief in witches spread across cultures, it reached its most infamous peak in medieval Europe, where accusations of witchcraft led to mass hysteria, trials, and executions. Though the European witch trials were deeply influenced by religious and political factors, they shared a striking resemblance to the Mesopotamian fear of sorcery. In both cases, witches were seen as individuals who had defied the natural order, using hidden knowledge to cause misfortune and suffering. The Ashipu, the Mesopotamian priest-magicians who hunted and exorcised witches, were mirrored in the inquisitors and witch hunters of later centuries. Just as the accused in Mesopotamia were subjected to the river ordeal, thrown into water to determine their innocence, European witch trials often relied on trial by water, where suspected witches were thrown into rivers or lakes. If they floated, they were declared guilty. If they sank, they were innocent, but often drowned in the process. This eerie similarity suggests that the fear of the witch had not been erased but merely transformed, adapting to the religious and cultural anxieties of each new era. Even today, remnants of Mesopotamian witch lore can be found in modern superstitions. The idea of the evil eye, a malevolent gaze capable of bringing misfortune, is deeply rooted in ancient Mesopotamian beliefs about curses and dark magic. Protective charms, once inscribed on clay tablets to ward off witches and demons, are still sold in marketplaces across the Middle East and beyond. The amulets bearing the likeness of Pazuzu, the demon king used to drive away lesser spirits, can still be found in modern occult practices, an unbroken link to the rituals of ancient exorcists. The image of the seductive and deadly witch embodied in the legend of Lilitu persists in the modern portrayal of femme fatales, succubi, and supernatural temptresses. Stories of spirits that prey on children, much like Lilitu and Lamashtu, can be found in folk tales around the world, from the La Llorona of Latin America to the Pontianak of Southeast Asia. Even in pop culture, the themes of ancient Mesopotamian witchcraft continue to surface. Horror films and books still depict witches summoning spirits, casting deadly curses, and using ancient rituals that closely resemble the spell-casting traditions of the Akkadians and Babylonians. The very idea that forbidden knowledge can grant power, but at a terrible cost, remains a dominant theme in horror and fantasy fiction. From the ancient temples of Mesopotamia to the darkened alleys of modern horror, the fear of witches has never truly died. The legends of those who wielded hidden, dangerous magic continue to haunt us, appearing in different forms and new stories, yet always carrying the same warning. Those who seek power beyond the natural order risk unleashing forces they cannot control. Though thousands of years have passed since the Mesopotamians first whispered of witches in the night, their fear still lingers in our collective imagination. Whether in the shadowy figures of folklore, the chilling tales of supernatural horror, or the whispered warnings passed down through generations, the ancient witches of Mesopotamia have never truly been forgotten. Their spirits still roam the edges of history, reminding us that some fears never fade, they simply take new forms.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.